we've got some wonderful people in studio today bringing us some information that I'm pretty sure will blow your minds. It's always good to find out new things. I love to learn, and today I think it's going to be a wonderful learning experience for all of us. So let's start off by introducing our panel in studio today. We have Ms. Ruslyn Richards. She's from the Guyana Forestry Commission, and Mr. David James. He is a special assistant on legal issues for the Ministry of Indigenous Peoples Affairs. And they're here today to talk to us about FLEGT. Now, I've been hearing about this because I remember you were on Jumpstart just a few weeks ago. And today they're here to tell us a little bit more about FLEGT. All right? Now, in case you've never heard about FLEGT, let's get Ms. Richards and Mr. James to just expound on this for us today. Good morning. Welcome to 94.
Good morning.
Good. It's really good to have you all. Can we start things off today by asking, what are the roles and responsibilities of the agencies engaged in the EU FLEGT VPA process? And can you give some examples of that? Because people do not understand. Probably they're hearing about FLEGT for the very first time. So could you break that down for us? What are the roles and responsibilities of the agencies?
Thank you very much for having us this morning. We really appreciate it. Maybe before we go in, let me just say or remind our listeners about what FLEGT is. Now, FLEGT means Forest Law, Enforcement, Governance and Trade, and it's a trade agreement between the EU and Guyana. It's a voluntary partnership agreement, which means that as a country, we decided that we wanted to be a part of this agreement. So it wasn't forced upon us.
Right.
And it's to ensure that legal timber enters into the EU market. So as a country, we're trying to ensure that we represent our country well by only sending legal timber out of the country. All right? So in order for us to do this, we need the cooperation of all the agencies that have responsibilities in this area. So the agreement, it entails environmental, economic, and social components.
Right.
So there are a lot of agencies that fall under these categories. For example, we have EPA, we have NIS, we have GRA, Ministry of Indigenous Peoples Affairs, and many like them. So we need them to ensure that this process works. Right? So the overall objective, though, is to ensure that we have verification of compliance. So their task is to assist us in ensuring that forest sector operators comply.
So that's why they're so important to the process? Yes. Okay. So what are some of the challenges, right, in getting the forest sector operators to comply with the requirements of the agency?
I'm sure you are aware that Guyana is wide and big, and most of the forest sector operators operate way out of the coastal area.
Right.
And that's where most of our agencies are, and that's where the difficulty lies. Oh. The agencies cannot meet most of the forest sector operators. And as agencies, another challenge is financial, and in addition to capacity, because the areas are so far out, it's very costly to do checks and balances way down in the savannas, the Rupununi savannas and areas like that. Right. So those are some of the challenges that we face, but we have been working together with the agencies to come up with possible ways of how we can reach the forest sector operators.
Now I'm seeing about the MOIPA. Can you break that down? What is that and what is the VPA? Mr. James.
Okay, good morning again, and thanks for having us on this program.
You're welcome, sir.
Well, the MOIPA actually is the Ministry of Indigenous Peoples Affairs.
Oh, got it. And the
right.
VPA?
And the VPA is the Voluntary Partnership Agreement.
Okay.
Actually, as Rosalind said, it's really in the process of being negotiated, or it's in the negotiation process. So it hasn't been signed as yet.
All right.
But when eventually it is, well, it will be a binding agreement on the parties to the agreement.
So what are some of the challenges that the ministry may face in getting the VPA implemented?
All right, well, the ministry has an important role to play in all of this. And before I even speak of the challenges, I should say that the ministry, because of the fact that we reach out to all the indigenous villages and communities across Guyana, we have a very good network in terms of communication and understanding and knowing the different situations across Guyana in the villages, the Amerindian villages. And so it is important that we play this very integral part in the VPA by providing accurate information generally on the villages involved in timber harvesting for commercial purposes, because this is where the effect would be. Villages use timber for traditional purposes as well, of course,
Right.
and the agreement would not touch that. But once a village gets involved in commercial timber harvesting, then of course they will have to abide by certain requirements and conditions under the agreement. Well, one of the things that Rosalind did mention was the remoteness and sometimes the lack of communication or the difficulty in communicating with villages. You also have the question of accessing them and just traveling from Georgetown to any one of these villages, Amerindian villages or other communities in the hinterland, can be very, very expensive, perhaps just as traveling from here to Barbados or Trinidad.
Very true, because I was thinking of doing it at one time by myself, and I was like, I didn't know it's so much money. So it is quite expensive, especially for companies as well, to take all their staff and all that in here.
Exactly. So that already tells you what the challenges are.
Right.
And so I think besides that, there are some others. But Rosalind, perhaps you don't want to mention any more.
All right. So, for instance, with agencies like NIS, we have a lot of challenges because we recently came back from consultations in those far-off areas, and we heard one officer saying that there was somebody who've never heard of NIS, and others who've never heard of the benefits of NIS. You know, because they're so way out, and NIS doesn't have the capacity to reach where they are. You know, so. Those are things that we're looking into, and as we continue our consultations, we're taking NIS out with us, and it is proving to be very productive.
Where is this? I want to move there. Because NIS catches me every time. Lived on the coast. I'm just kidding. I'm so sorry. But tell me about some of the changes that the ministry would have to make just to make this whole thing work.
Yes, that's a very important question, because once you talk about any resource extraction in the hinterland, it usually means that indigenous communities and people will be affected in some way, whether directly or indirectly. So on the one hand, you have communities that probably will be involved in commercial harvesting of timber, and then you will have communities that may be affected by the harvesting of timber, on lands contiguous to them. And in the Amerindian Act, it does speaks to any harvesting of timber or concessions granted by GFC on lands contiguous to the title lands of indigenous communities, that certain conditions must be met, including, of course, consultation and perhaps even better yet, consent, if that can be had. And so for the Ministry of Indigenous Peoples, we have to ensure that we have accurate information, that we keep people informed. Of course, we collaborate very closely with GFC on this matter, because GFC is the agency that is responsible for forestry. And so it is important to have that collaboration and timely information and the efficiency of it as well, because many times communities complain that they have a grievance, they make a complaint, and then they hear nothing for months. And that might be true in some cases because of the difficulty in communication and other things. But the fact is, what we want to do at the ministry is to ensure that there's greater efficiency. And one of the things which is related to this actually is a grievance mechanism that is being established on another project that we have at the ministry called the Amerindian Land Titling Project.
Right.
And so there is, in designed in terms of already discussions and agreements to have a grievance mechanism established, including an office at the ministry, so that we can deal with issues relating to land and other resource rights issues that may come up. So that is something that is very important, because under the VPA, that really is a requirement that issues affecting indigenous peoples must be addressed in a fair and equitable manner. And so we're working towards creating that, those conditions, or at least the mechanisms to ensure that we have that situation under control.
I understand, because it's all a process, right? Yeah. Right, Ms. Richards, it's all a process. And the reason why we're talking about it on air today is because as Guyanese, we have to be informed about what's happening in our country. And this particular agency, the Guyana Forestry Commission, has been doing a lot of work, and many times it's under the radar. Yes. You know, it's not something that we shout from the rooftops. So learning about FLEGT today has really helped me, and I'm hoping that it has helped you as a listener of the program today to understand how Guyana can indeed benefit from something like this. So thank you very much for being here. And in wrapping up, anything else you'd like to leave with us, Ms. Richards and Mr. James?
Can I say it's not just the forest sector operators that will benefit, the entire country nationally will benefit, because if we produce quality products legally, I mean, you can trust your suppliers that, hey, I'm getting quality and legal products, you know, so we become more trustworthy.
That's right. Thank you, Ms. Richards. Mr. James, anything else?
Just that I think in all of this, it's also helping to ensure the sustainable use of our forest resource, which is really important to everyone. And so I think this is perhaps the biggest benefit that we can look forward to.
I agree. And I thank you so much for choosing our show to talk to us about this. And I wish you all the best. FLEGT, everybody. We're going to learn more about this here on the show as time goes along. Thank you so much for being here, Ms. Richards and Mr. James.
Thank you for having us.
Anytime.